Hello, everyone. It looks like we are live. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming out. So, who wants to start answering Anna's question there from Llewellyn?
I can go ahead and jump in. Hi, everyone. Great to see you. And I love all of the conversation happening in the chat. And the first question is for us to start with an introduction and to share a bit about our book and what are our spiritual and magical backgrounds. So, who wants to take the lead on that?
Oh, I
Oh,
thought
I
you
thought
were.
you
You
were.
make the question. Okay, I'll jump right in. So my name is Lindsay Fauntleroy. My book is In Our Element, which I have here. And my background is I'm an acupuncturist, a flower essence practitioner, medicine maker, and educator. And so my book talks about how do we take these 5 elements, bring them into our lives in a very practical way, and use them to shapeshift some of the emotional, I call them soul hiccups in the book. So anxiety, depression, fear, doubt, any of the ways that we're not standing in our absolute destiny and greatness and magic and power. How do we figure out which element has a gift for us and then tap into that wisdom and that energetic current to be in the proper alignment of our life? And so super excited to be here with all of you and these fabulous fellow authors. And who would like to take the proverbial cyber mic?
I'll go. I'll take it. We'll go double L's and then double T's. So we've got two of each letter today if you're playing your Wordle. So my name is Lauren Walker, and this is my book. It's called The Energy to Heal. And this is the third book that I've written, and the second one that uses the 5 element theory as sort of the template for understanding. And in this book, the focus is on healing trauma and stress. And so the theory that is in the book is that each stress or trauma that you have has a little bit of each element in it. And you need to gather the information and the wisdom from that element in order for you to be fully complete and being able to let go then of your trauma or of your stress so that you can move forward in freedom and in joy in your life. So that's the way that I use the 5 elements in this book. And I'm super excited to be here. Thank you, Llewellyn, and thank you to all of you, fellow authoresses, and everyone out there. We're going to have a super fun half hour. So thank you.
I can go next because my book really piggybacks well off of yours. So I'm Tisha Morris, and I don't have my book here because my latest book, because it comes out in November. I haven't gotten an advance copy yet, but it's called Missing Element, Hidden Strength. And this is my 4th book with Llewellyn. Some of you may be familiar with Decorating the 5 Elements of Feng Shui, Mind, Body, Home, Clutter Intervention. This book takes the 5 elements. So I'm a Feng Shui practitioner. And so the 5 elements normally we use I use in spaces and to arrange things accordingly. Now I'm taking the 5 elements into our personalities and into seeing where our missing element is, and with the theory that your missing element is your hidden strength, and how important that is in up-leveling the creative process. The 5 elements is the creative process. Nature shows us the template. Mm-hmm. And we all have a missing element, meaning like a weakness in that creative process. And so identifying that is often where your Achilles heel is, or where you kind of get stuck in, whether it's writing a book or really creating anything, even in relationships, even in like how you garden. If your plants, like there's always there's a missing element in their gardening process a lot of times, and how we do one thing is how we do everything. So this book identifies what that is and helps you integrate it into your everyday life by simple things, whether it be activities or simply rearranging your office. So that's my upcoming book. Tess?
Cool. That sounds amazing.
Thanks.
So I'm Tess Whitehurst. I have written a number of books. Actually, I realize I haven't written about the 5 element system that much, but I do work with it and I love it. I have a little bit in my book, You Are Magical, because in You Are Magical, I talk about the 5 element system, the 5 elements in Western mysticism, and also the 5 elements in Ayurveda, and then also the Chinese 5 elements. My personal experience with the 5 elements is mostly through my feng shui practice. So I just taught a workshop on this at HexFest last weekend, the elements in decor. It's just this 5 element system, if you haven't worked with it before, is so fascinating. The dynamism of it, the way each element supports one element and each element is detrimental to or kind of depletes an element. It's just so much alchemy, and there's no end to how much you can like see it in the world. It's like a language. It's an alchemical language, and it's so helpful for creating harmony, in my experience, in your home, in the visual aspects of your home, and then in a way that really nourishes you spiritually and helps you manifest and helps you experience what you want to experience. So I recommend, if you don't know about how it all works together yet, I recommend adding that into your spiritual practice. And it sounds like Tisha's book, at least in feng shui, the 5 element one you were talking about, might be a really cool way to learn it in your home.
It looks like, from looking behind me here, I could use a little 5 element feng shui. And I love that, we each sort of use that lens. And the 5 elements is a lens through which you see the world. That's how we identify individually, at least in my tradition, with the 5 elements. We each have a primary and a secondary element. And it's really the lens through which we see, through which we heal, and through which we also unheal, get injured, get dis-ease patterns in the body. And so understanding this dynamic interaction is so powerful. And you can really use this as a way to view any part of your life. So I haven't really looked at the feng shui of the 5 elements yet, but I think that might be the next thing for me. And I just love how dynamic, how each one of us has used this lens to focus our different bailiwicks out into the world. It's really exciting.
Well, it makes sense that we would see it in different facets, because everything on the planet, perhaps beyond, haven't gone there yet, but consists of usually a combination of the 5 elements, everything from, obviously nature with, trees and dirt and all that, but even everything in our interiors, from my fake plant behind me, that's a fake plant, yes, to the picture frame that's metal, and then that corresponds with the organ systems in the body, the lungs and the kidneys and so forth. But I think it might be helpful, because a lot of people confuse the 5 elements with other elemental systems, for example, in astrology. So I think it might be nice to clarify the difference in the 5 element system from those.
Well, yeah, Anna has asked if we can go through each of the 5, and that might be a good way to start.
Yeah.
Should we start with earth? Or?
I always like starting with water personally, because even though the cycle is a cycle, which is a circle, there's no end or beginning to any cycles or circles, right? But the water element is where the cycle theoretically ends and begins. It's that seed point, and it starts with winter, which is when we do plant the seeds, which is ideas. It's more of the ethereal, closest to God is how I think of it. So anyway, I'd like to hear y'all's thoughts.
In my book, I talk about these elements as soul lessons. And so one of the ways that I really started organizing it this way, and I see there's some 5 element practitioners in the chat, so hi. But, I do acupuncture, and then COVID happened and I had to close my practice for a while. So I wanted to offer my patients and my community a way to access what I consider these elements as portals. And so I think about each of the inner soul transformational alchemical lessons of the elements. And for water, which is the metaphor of the seed and what it feels like to be incubated and internal and introspective. And the soul lessons that I associate with that are creating an oasis, which means if we're going too hard and not knowing how to stop and replenish ourselves, then we call on the water element to replenish, to connect to the source, which is, to your point about this connection to the spirit world. And then the third soul lesson I have for the water element is about being ancient and remembering that we are the same. One of my girlfriends says we are breathing the same air that our ancestors breathed. So this idea that the water element in Chinese medicine, we talk about the Jing, and we talk about what's being passed down through our psychic DNA and our bloodline. And the water element is where we come back to that, and why in so many traditions we pour libation and we use water to remember our ancestors.
Ah,
It's
I love
beautiful.
it. So when I think of the water element, having it, well aspected in your home, but also then that is in your life, I think of it as emotional depth and authenticity, like finding that place where you can go into who you really are, what really nourishes you, and then flow with that. Let that kind of carry you forward with connecting you to your joy. Now we could also talk about an excess of water that is not well aspected, in which case that would feel depressing and lonely. So this is one of the things about the 5-element system is it's not like, I think in Western mysticism, it's also like, here's all the great things about water. And I think in this system, you can also see like, but if you have too much and if you don't have a balance with other things, then this. So it's like, that's that language of alchemy.
That's so beautiful. I'm taking notes. I hope all of you out there are taking notes, because there's all these beautiful gems. In my tradition, we also start in water. That's the start of incubation, the quantum potential, the place where all healing begins and where growth begins. And one of the things, so I didn't really contextualize the work that I do, which is energy medicine yoga. So these practices are within a traditional yoga practice, and leaning into all of these different energy systems, and 5 elements is actually one of the energy systems that we all have in our bodies and in our energy fields. And one of the pieces that we work on, which really feels like it piggybacks with Tisha, with your book, which I'm really excited to read, is the emotional component of things, because often in trauma and stress, it's the emotional story that keeps us stuck. And one of the things that I loved when I discovered 5-element theory is that it includes all of the emotions and gives us a really dynamic way of working with them and processing the energy of our emotions and releasing it. And so in water, the challenging emotion is fear, and we balance that by moving into courage. And so those are sort of there, as well as all of these other juicy, 5 elements theory is as big as you can get. It's the taxonomy for the entire universe. So it's a big field of study.
That's a good pivot to the wood element. I like what you said of to overcome the fear, you have to step into the courage. And that really is when we come into this earth. We all have these 5 elements within ourselves. And at certain times of our life, some are more accentuated. And when we're actually come out of the womb, that's the first visible manifestation of this energy, and that's birth. So that's we move from the womb into birth into the wood element, which is represented by the season of spring. So we kind of all follow these rhythms or cycles. After a cold winter, that first day of spring, when you almost come out of your house literally for the first time in a while if you're in a seasonal climate. So wood element, that's my native element. It's near and dear to me, which means if you have too much of it, if I have too much wood, then I like it has reverse effects on me. So I'm very careful about not having too much wood around me.
I'm seeing some lovely conversation in the chat about the elements. And I do want to clarify, one of the things that I talk about in the book is that if we look at any system that comes out of the ancient world, whether it's astrology or the Native American medicine wheel, certainly the 5 elements, that that these are coming out of a shamanic period of history when humanity and nature were really interconnected. However, each of these systems is its own system and they stay intact together. And so the example that I talk about in the book is that, fire and the sun, fire is fire, but our relationship to fire is going to be different, whether we're living in a desert, if we're living in Antarctica, right? So it's still fire, but because these systems originated out of different places, the elements are a little bit different. So I really try to keep each system intact together. I love astrology and do quite a bit with astrology, and I honor those 4 elements. When I'm looking at another system, I honor those 4 elements. But then when we try to mix them together, it can get a little bit like, well, I thought that fire was this energy, or a lot of times the fire and the wood in Chinese medicine get kind of mixed up. And so with the wood element, which isn't one of the elements of the astrological system, like you said, it's that bursting out in the spring, learning how to take a stand. And my favorite aspect of the wood element is using anger, which is the energy of the wood element, as a tool for change and transformation. It's that impetus to transform and assert and be unapologetic. So it's one of my favorite elements as well. I had to call on it an awful lot to finish this book and to really learn my own voice, my own authentic voice.
Yeah.
I love that.
When I think of the wood element, I think of upward movement and expansion. I also think of self-cultivation. Yes. Expansion, upward, like bamboo, and also actually like bamboo and trees, like having that flexibility. If there's a storm, this is the feng shui language of wood to me. But yeah, and exercise, study, any way that you personally want to expand is what I associate with the wood element.
Nice. I love that. And, I'm really glad, Lindsay, that you brought up the different elemental systems, because there are many, even just within, so energy medicine yoga, we lean very heavily into ancient Chinese medicine and ancient Indian medicine. And there's 2 separate systems of elements within each of those. There are some crossovers, but they don't all correlate. And then you brought up as well astrology and the Native American medicine wheel. So that, I think it's really important that we understand what Lindsay's saying, that these systems they're not interchangeable. And when you're working within one, then you kind of work within that system and respect that boundary system as that is and as that appears. And everything everyone said about wood, I'm also a wood element. So working with understanding my anger and transforming that into assertive action, that's sort of my superpower. And it can be my Achilles heel. And so we each kind of start to learn who we are in the elements, as well as how we utilize them in our lives and in the world. So it's so multifaceted. It's a fractal down to the DNA and up to the Webb telescope.
Yeah. Like if you're wood, you need to expand. If you're fire, you need to shine. Like you have this awareness, like you won't feel right if you're not doing that.
And with the wood element, you need to expand and grow. And if you can't, that's where the anger comes from. Or with the water element, you need to trust and surrender. And if you can't, that's where the fear comes from. So this beautiful system that teaches us that it's not about what's wrong with us, but what is our potential, what is available to us if we can find it and work with it.
Yeah.
The wood element is, I think, of the archetype of a pioneer or a leader. And so when you're charging ahead, doing things for the first time, you have to be like a bamboo. You have to be malleable and flexible. You're almost inventing the wheel. And so there's going to be trial and errors. And so that's oftentimes when a wood element can get the energy of frustration, is when, oh man, that didn't work out the way I thought it was. I have to try again. So they have to be very flexible in that.
Yeah, and we should mention too that the reason we went from water to wood is because water nourishes wood.
Yep.
So now we'll move to fire, because wood feeds fire.
The cycle of life. The metaphor, I think, water is the seed, wood is the sprout, and then fire is the flower blossom. And I think about, a flower that draws things to it, that shines, that's fabulous and unapologetically fabulous, and able to connect and draw in. We think of romance and love and connection. And so when I talk about fire in the book, I'm talking about, well, what does it feel like when your heart isn't able to shine and radiate and expand? What flower essences do you use? What yoga poses do you use to bring that expansion back into your heart center, which is the natural organic flow of the fire element?
Yeah.
And you can again look to nature, and then it's represented by summer, which is when everything is at its fullest. It's like the yang, I call the yangest time of the year, and it's also the yangest amount of energy that we put towards a project, whether it's writing a book, it's getting all 60, 80,000 words on a page. It's the ultimate expression of energy, and it hits a high point. And I won't give it away, but then we go to Earth. But it's at the high point, which we kind of reached that high point right now, seasonally speaking, with the heat, at least in most United States areas.
I love that metaphor of blooming into the flower as the full expression. I feel like I need to really sit with that, because when I think about fire as the follower of wood, I think about it more. I live in fire country. I think about the wood feeding the fire to build that,
Right.
Whether that's for heating, cooking your food, heating your house, in the fire in the belly, right? That really positive, yang, powerful energy. And then too much of it is the wildfires that burning all around, that smoke filled, that devastation. And then for us as individuals, it's like, do we have enough spark to bring the joy into our lives as the positive expression, or the negative expression? Are we just dragging through life like a wet sponge or a wet towel? We just can't, the lethargy, we don't have the spark to move forward, the excitement, the joy, the intuition, the inspiration. We're just kind of like, So, but I love the flower. This is a new piece of like, it's the blooming as well, not just the kind of, I think of fire as the transformation, but first the blooming, or maybe they happen simultaneously. Maybe the blooming is the transformation.
Yeah, I love it too on a number of levels. I'm always going to remember it, Lindsay. I like, first of all, like in feng shui, I like how, because radial shapes, like daisy shape, is the fire element. It's like a sunshine shape is one of the ways the fire element is represented in the space. But also the way a flower, a blossom, it's like the face of a plant. It's like you connecting on a heart level to the energy of the plant. And also in feng shui, pictures of people, pictures of animals. It's like whenever you see that, it's kind of like seeing flame. It's like when you see a candle or you see a picture of a face, it's like you're drawn to it. And I feel like blossoms are a similar thing in nature.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in feng shui, so animals and people are archetypally fire elements. So my guy back here, that would be a fire element in my space.
Yeah, and my mermaid is fire, but also water.
I would think water.
Both.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So then the next element is going into the earth element. I'm seeing some conversation in the chat, and there is, to be fair, even in classical Chinese medicine, there is a little bit of confusion about where the earth belongs. So some arrangements have the earth following this creation cycle, which is the one we've been sharing. And then some systems place the earth in the center so that every element returns to the earth before transitioning to the next season. So if it is a little bit confusing, it's part of the medicine. It's part of a lot of scholarly debate about where does this earth element go. But I think
there's a third as well, though, the equinox points.
The equinox points as the transition points between the elements. And then I've also heard the cross-quarter dates as being the true dates that the seasons change. So there's a lot of debate, and what I love about this medicine as it being an archetypal system is that we get to live into it and embody it and feel into it, and really going outside and what do I feel right now in my body as I'm experiencing nature. And for me, here I'm in the New York City area, and it's really humid and sticky, and that's the climate that is typically associated with this earth element, late summer, harvest season. And I think the metaphor coming from the flower is the fruit, and the earth element deals with how we nourish ourselves, how we feed ourselves through our experiences and through how we take care of our bodies and that sort of thing. That nurturing quality is, and that community family quality is what I associate with the earth element.
Yeah, I completely agree with all that. Beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that as well. And part of what we work with in the earth element, and we work it both ways, being on the outside of the wheel and then in the center of the wheel. Because in my tradition, for healing, self-love needs to be there. It needs to be one of the primary foundational things that happens for you to heal, especially big traumas that you've had in your life. And the earth element is all about loving the self. So all of those things that we do to nourish the self is part of how much we love and caretake for the self. And we need to also go deep to the core of our belief systems about ourselves, the stories we tell about ourselves, and how that works through this elemental system. Gives us tools to increase that self-love, especially if we've lost it or it's been taken away through the vicissitudes of challenging life. We need to come back to that. So whether you put earth on the outside or in the center of the wheel, your body is the center of your life. And so that needs to be your primary always. You're always coming back. The patterns that you do and your practices that you do, it's about putting the love for yourself primary, and then everything blooms from there.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So
I think sorry, Tess, go ahead.
Oh, okay, I just want to say about the earth element. So in feng shui, squares and rectangles are the earth element, and also horizontal planes. So you could think of the earth element metaphorically as a big, cozy, fluffy bed. So that kind of energy of receptivity, self-care, rest, recharging, being horizontal, being the earth element. And then, excess of earth would be feeling stuck, like you're not moving. So it's like you want to recharge in the bed, but you don't want to stay in bed all day.
Yeah.
That's awesome. A good point.
Yeah, too much of any element is too much is not always a good thing, right? With any of these elements.
Any of them, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is what I want to differentiate the 5 element cycle with the other elemental systems to point out that it is a cycle, and that is how it's different than other elemental systems. It's the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, and creation. And so it's this cycle that we're going through that makes it so different than the other elemental systems.
And that's what makes it so powerful. It's like it gives you this language that you can be like, oh, we need more fire here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Once you know and you can see it, then you have all of this agency for shifting your energy.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
And
So
then
the
as
earth
well, like
element-
part of the mastery of that circle is when you're then able to spiral. So then you're coming up off of the wheel, and every time you go around it, you're looking from a different perspective with a different piece of wisdom and information. So you're not just going around and around doing the same thing over and over again and hoping something changes. You're actually doing something slightly different that takes you off of the circle into the spiral and gives you a higher viewpoint, more wisdom, so that you ultimately are transforming.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately.
Yeah, I think it was rings of a tree, the tree rings in a way.
Beautiful.
The spiral.
So metal.
So
Metal.
the way that I think about metal in my practice is we've gone from the seed to the sprout to the flower to the fruit. And then the metal is what happens when the apple hits the ground and starts to compost. So metal is, I think of it as the transcendence from the material world to the spiritual.
Oh, yeah.
And so sometimes it's associated with spirit. Sometimes it's associated with ritual and religion. And then also, because I see in the chat that we have some gemstone collectors, what I think about with the metal element is the essence of things. And what a gemstone is a crystallized essence of nature energy. And so the metal element gives us the capacity to release what no longer serves us and hold on to the essence of things without like get it away, throw away the stuff, keep the essence. And there's grief in that process of letting go, which is the emotion of the metal element.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with the metal, I think of focus, like being able to have a clear focus. And I think of science, like in feng shui, the metal element is white and also like chrome. So if you think of like a like a lab or a surgeon's office. It's like they're white and chrome because it's really helpful. I mean, there's probably other reasons, but I mean, it's such a helpful environment for being very focused and clear and present, using mental energy.
Oh, yeah, I never thought about that.
So in the creative process, the metal phase is editing, basically. Editing, whether it's a book or if it's a design, like this is too much fabric, or you can also think of it as a hairstylist who, cutting the hair, separating the wheat from the chaff. We've gone through the cycle, and we hit the apex of energy in the fire stage, and then we plateaued in the earth phase, and then now the energy starts to dissipate and becomes more yin as it returns back to the spirit world. And so it is a refinement. And so the metal element are the best designers because they can cut away, as y'all were saying, and get to the essence, whether it's interiors, a book, a hairstylist, or whatever the case is.
Yeah,
it's like cutting away.
Yeah,
go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, I know, just cutting away what's not needed anymore. And I sort of look at it like that's the wisdom gathering from what we've gone through. And the fact of earth, again, so interesting. Earth comes before metal on the wheel, or it's in the center, or if you can hold those two in your mind, it's at both at the same time. And you think about how long it takes to compress earth to become a diamond. That pressure and that time.
Inward movement. Yeah.
And so it's like that time that it takes us to harvest the wisdom of a situation is coming into that metal where we can finally let go because we've understood what we've needed to learn, whether it's our whole life or one specific incident in our life. And then we go back to water and take another trip, another layer up, because we've then gotten this wisdom and we've climbed up a little bit to see, okay, this is my life now with this piece of knowledge.
Another thing that I think about with metal, and metal is one of those elements where I don't know if any of you have had that experience where there's like one element where you kind of just don't get it, and then something happens, and you're like, that's metal, I get it. And so associating for me metal with self-esteem, and I think about a gold miner, that's like sifting through the rocks and throwing out the mud, and then they might bypass a piece of gold because they can't see it covered in the mud. And we can do that to ourselves as well. The precision of metal, the commitment of metal to the essence of things, it can be really self-depreciating, and we can beat up on ourselves and not see our true value and worthiness of spirit because we're stuck in these bodies, and the metal element is like, no, I'm a divine being. How do I get to being a divine being? I shouldn't be making these mistakes. And the metal element can be very critical in that way of the human experience as it is aspiring to be back in spirit and back in wholeness and divinity again.
Right, because it's so mental.
It's so mental, and it's like,
What are all the things that are wrong with me?
Yes, exactly.
I need to analyze it.
Yes, I'm gonna pull it apart, and I'm gonna, and then it can throw out the essence or the beauty or the quintessence because it's looking for perfection.
Yeah, an example of how we want balance of all. You need them all, but you need them in balance as best you can.
And what I love that we each have pieces. We each have all of the 5 elements within us. And so what don't we understand about an element that we could start to cultivate a little bit more? And again, I think, Tisha, maybe this speaks more to your work, but understanding that where am I in life burying away my treasures because I don't see them or I don't believe I have them, or, to lean into that metal, even if you might not have it so much in your personal narrative or chart. That's the gift of metal. And so how do I find and harvest that gift, even if me personally, and I am Lauren, I don't have a ton of metal. And so that's been a lesson that keeps coming up. Let go, let go, let go. I don't want to let go. Okay, you're going to get that lesson again. Let go, let go. And so, okay, let me learn to have a little more metal so I don't need to keep having this huge lesson, because they're here to teach you all the elements, the world, the earth, the planet. That's what we're all here for, I think, is just to learn and grow and experience and love. So
beautiful.
Yeah, in my upcoming book, I take the position that even though we have all 5, we have our own constitution of what's balanced to us. So we're not all meant to be perfectly balanced among all 5.
Yeah.
And where, for example, if metal is your missing element, in my case, I show you ways of how you can collaborate with others to kind of to kind of fill in that missing element, so to speak. Or there's times when we just want to do our own project, we want to do our own thing, in which case you need to add little metal in those cases, but also in teams, how to use the 5 elements among different. We have the 4 of us right now. We're probably each our element constitution is different, so we collaborate well together. Our host asked the question of how to find what your element is. I have a quiz actually on my website that you can answer 20 questions, and it gives you the rundown. But you can also tell by people's facial and even what clothes you wear. But I'd like to hear how y'all come up with.
Well, I want to take your quiz. I have a quiz in my book too, and so I feel like you need to get all of our books. And someone asked us to say who we are, so let's go up and say our name in our books. And then really, if everyone has a 5-element quiz, I think you should take all of the quizzes and see where they differ, because each of us, right, being a different element, is going to share how we find to the elements in a different way. So my name is Lauren Walker. My book from Llewellyn is called The Energy to Heal.
My name is Lindsay Fauntleroy. My book is In Our Element. And the way that I talk about how to find which element phase you are, I don't, in my book, talk about what your constitutional element is. I talk about it from the perspective of which element is trying to get your attention right now for whatever you're trying to manifest, which may or may not be your constitutional. So I take you through a process to reflect on your circumstances, which would be the physical plane, then your emotions and what you're feeling, which will draw you through the etheric plane. Then we look at signatures of each of the elements, which is the astral plane. And then finally, we look at your purpose. What is your purpose for whatever soul work you're doing at the time? And that's going to connect to the spiritual plane or the causal plane. So that's how I organize it in my book, In Our Element.
So while you were talking, I realized I did write about the 5-element system in this book.
Thank you so much.
Magical Fashionista. I talk about it with regards to how it manifests in your appearance, your physical appearance, and your clothes. And also, I talk about your Chinese horoscope, because we all have an element associated with our Chinese sign also.
Beautiful.
A lot of times you can just read the description of each of the elements and you're like, oh, that's definitely me, or that's definitely not me. In some way, sometimes that seems like the quickest way to get to the root of it. But I'm Tisha Morris, and I'm the author of Decorating with the 5 Elements of Feng Shui, and also my upcoming book, Missing Element, Hidden Strength, that comes out in November. It's on pre-order now.
Awesome. Did we answer everybody? Anna, do we have... Oh, thanks everyone. Unfortunately, we're starting to run though. One more question.
One more question. Who's got it?
The person that puts a question into the chat might be our last question of the day. Who's got that?
While we're waiting, I just want to mention, it just so happens my most recent blog post is about the 5 elements because of the workshop I taught at HexFest. I made a handout on my website. So if you go to tesswhitehurst.com, you can see, just scroll down a little, my latest blog post. It shows a lot of examples of how the elements manifest in your home. Okay.
Here's the next question. How can we get the replay? What is the one that you want folks to know about working with the 5? Okay, there's our question from Anna. If we have one thing that you want people to know about working with the 5 elements, she's like, only one, what would they be? So each one of us, maybe just say your one thing.
Don't panic. That's my one thing. Because there's a lot of information. Just learn as you go. Be kind to yourself. Kind of give yourself time, and don't feel like, oh no, I don't have enough, metal or whatever. Just like, oh, okay, that's good to know, and then kind of work with it as you go, as you learn.
My one thing would be that the elements are sentient and transformative. They shape us and we shape them. And so in my book, I talk about things like music, hip hop music, R&B music, and all the different ways that we can tune in, because even though these elements are ancient, they're still with us and they're transforming and showing up in our entire lives now. So they are part of us. So work with them, be your own laboratory, because it is sentient, transformative system. One thing. That's my one thing.
That's one thing.
That's one-ish.
I will say that per the title of my book, the element that you're least drawn to could hold the key to some certain challenges in your life. And my whole book was inspired by the Joseph Campbell quote of "The cave you fear to enter holds the key, holds your greatest treasure." And I think of that in terms of your missing element, and not that you have to go dive, full in, but just taste it and get familiar with it, and that can open up a lot, because we're all evolving. We're all moving to a new level of consciousness, and also our work in the world. And so sometimes it's just integrating a little bit more of these elements that can really make that big difference.
Totally.
I love that. Okay, so my one thing, because my work is focused right now on healing trauma and stress, what I would say about the 5 elements is working with them is a joyful practice. It's a joyful healing practice. So what everybody else said here also, it's joyful. Healing feels so much better than suffering. So if you even have an inkling of wanting to dive in and learn from the 4 of us and learn for yourself this incredibly powerful tool that has been around for 5,000 plus years, we all invite you in. We all invite you in. And I know I'm excited to read all of these 3 books and learn more. It is an endless, fascinating topic. And once you get a little bit of taste of it, you'll see how it can change your life.
Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks for everyone who came. Thank you for our host, Llewellyn. Thank you so much for having all of us